How to reliably maximize your retirement income. Is the 4% rule safe? Okay, so you want to retire soon. What's the best way to set up your retirement income to give you the maximum income that will reliably last for the rest of your life? Many financial planners use the 4% rule, which says that you can, for example, withdraw 40,000 per year, rising by inflation for life from a $1 million portfolio. Is that safe? So I studied 146 years of investment history and looked at it. So the conclusions are surprising. So first, most of the advice seniors are given is not supported by history. And number two, I found what really works to give you the maximum reliable retirement income, both how to set up your portfolio and how to manage your income. So in this talk, you will learn what is the typical advice given to seniors and does it work? What does Ed's study of 146 years of actual history show you about the 4% rule? Which asset allocations provide the most reliable retirement income? What's the main risk to your retirement for any asset allocation? Is it safer to hold some cash to use during market downturns? What are the reasons that the actual results of history are surprising? How can you manage sequence of returns risk? What is the impact of inflation? How does your risk tolerance affect your retirement income? What is Ed's rule of thumb for a safe withdrawal rate? And are there advanced methods to manage a higher retirement income with 100% success? So first, let's talk about the conventional wisdom. So let's look at the typical advice given to seniors about to retire. So here's the main 6 points. Number one, invest conservatively because you can't afford to take a loss. Number two, the 4% rule, you can safely withdraw 4% of your investments and increase that by inflation for the rest of life. You're right. That's the number two conventional wisdom. Number three, invest conservatively because you can run out of money because of the sequence of returns. A few bad years shortly after you retire can sink your retirement. Number four, try to live off the interest and don't touch the principal. Number five, don't invest more than 100 minus your age or 110 in stocks. So that's a common rule of thumb saying that at age 70, you should have 70% in bonds and 30% in stocks. So keep cash equal to 2 years' income to withdraw on when your investments are down. Now, these 6 are the conventional wisdom advice typically given to seniors, but history shows that these are generally not the best advice and not supported by history. So my 146-year study of sustainable retirement income withdrawals. So I recently did a maximum sustainable retirement income study. I studied 146 years of actual history to see what would have happened if you had retired each year using different withdrawal rates and various strategies, and also different asset allocations, and varying amounts of stocks, bonds, and cash, to answer 3 questions. Number one, how much retirement income can you safely withdraw from your investments? Number two, how should you invest to minimize your risk of running out of money? And 3, what strategies can reliably give you the highest retirement income? So now some of the results of my 146-year study are in the chart below. The chart needs a bit of explanation. So the chart's shown here on the screen. So the 4% rule, first of all, I just want to clarify, is not a rule. It's a guideline for a withdrawal rate that may or may not be safe depending on various factors, which we'll talk about here. So now in this study, I defined success in retiring as providing a reliable income rising with inflation for 30 years. That means you retire at 65 and your money lasts at least to age 95. So now the chart shows the odds of success at each allocation of stocks and bonds, assuming different withdrawal rates, plus inflation for 30 years. For example, looking at the 4% withdrawal in the chart to test the 4% rule, the success rate has been 96 to 97% with equity-focused portfolios, but only 47% with bond-focused portfolios. So the allocation of stocks to bonds is most commonly done by selecting equity funds at stocks, or balanced or income funds, which are typically 50% stocks, 50% bonds, or bond funds. The bottom section on highest success rate is a test of the 4% rule. So if you want a 95% or 98% sure, if you want to be that sure that you won't run out of money, the chart shows the maximum amount you can withdraw from your investments. For example, if you want to use the 100 minus your age rule of thumb and have 70% bonds and 30% equities, on average through retirement, when you are close to 70, you should limit your withdrawals to 3.6%, not 4% of your investments. So 98% of the time in history, your money would have lasted 30 years. Now, here's how the success rate for withdrawals 3%, 4%, and 5% have happened in history by asset allocation. Note the blue line with the numbers is the 4% rule. So the most reliable with 4% is 70 to 100% equities with a 97% success rate. Then is 50 to 60% equities with a 95% success rate. But is a 1 in 20 chance of running out of money safe enough? With less than 50% in equities, the success rate falls precipitously down to only 47% with 100% bonds. So that shows you that basically the higher the amount of equity you have, the safer your retirement is, and that's for any withdrawal rate. Now, here are the graphs showing the actual results in history of withdrawing $40,000 per year plus inflation for 30 years with 3 different portfolios. Now, each line shows the portfolio value over 30 years for one retirement year. Okay, note how often the line falls to 0. Now, the 3 charts, the first one shows the actual retirement history of 100% equities with a 4% withdrawal rate, plus inflation. And it's a nice colorful chart. Each line is retiring in 1 year, starting in 1871 and going forward. Each line is a 30-year retirement. So now with 100% equities, your portfolio would have only hit 0 5 times in the last 146 years. Okay, the only failures were retiring in 1929 and the late 1960s. Note that retiring in 1929, just before the Great Depression, was a failure, but not retiring 1 year before or 1 year after. So just that 1 year. Now, retiring late 1960s failed because the high inflation in the 1970s and 1980s made the withdrawal rates unsustainably high. So this shows the main risk with 100% equities, and it's also the same with bonds, is not a market crash, it's inflation. The next chart is the actual history of success rate of 70% bonds, 30% equities. Let's say the 100%, the 100 minus age rule. So 70% bonds, 30% equities with 4% withdrawal rate. And now with the 100% minus age rule, you would invest 70% bonds when close to age 70. You would have run out of money retiring in 20 different years out of 146. So these include a few times in the late 1800s and early 1900s, several when retiring in the late 1930s to mid 1940s, and most of the time retiring from between the mid 1950s to late 1960s. So those are all the times when you went down to 0 with that rule. Now the last chart shows the actual retirement history with 100% bonds with a 4% rule. Now you think the thinking is bonds is the safe one, but notice that it's not. With 100% bonds, your retirement income is the opposite of safe. You would have run out of money more than half the time in the last 146 years, including if you had retired almost every year between 1880 and 1970. So for 90 years, almost everyone that retired with only bonds or fixed income using the 4% rule ran out of money. Now, the results of the study, the conclusions are very useful and surprising. So the history of investments shows the following. Number 1, equities are safer over a 30-year retirement. The more conservatively you invest, the more likely you will run out of money. At every withdrawal amount, the more you invest in stocks, the more reliable your retirement income. And this is shocking. Number 2, fixed income is lower income. The more conservatively you invest, the lower your retirement income should be. That shouldn't be surprising. Number 3, the 4% rule. Yes, it works for equity investors. No for income investors. Now that's probably surprising. The success of the 4% rule depends on how you invest. So equity investors, that's 70% to 100% equities, can safely withdraw 4%. Now balanced investors, 60 to 40 or 40 to 60, should reduce it to a 3.8% rule. Conservative investors, with more than 60% bonds or GICs, should limit it to a 3% rule. And bond or GIC investors with no equities should limit it to 2.5%. So, and number 4, it is safer not to hold cash. So holding cash does not protect you and may increase your risk of running out of money. It's safer not to hold cash. That again is surprising, and I'll show you that in a moment. Okay, now holding cash to cover down years. Many financial planners recommend holding cash equal to 2 years withdrawals to draw on when your investments are down. The idea is that after a significant down year, you can live off your cash and not touch your investments to give them some time to recover. Now, this sounds logical, but was not supported by the 146-year study. For example, assuming 100% in equities and a cash withholding, here are the success rates. So notice that the highest success rate for every withdrawal rate is no cash. In some cases, like a 4% rule, having 2 years cash ends up being about the same, but it's not better. And in any other case, it's worse. The more cash you have, the worse it is. So in every case, holding cash either had no effect or increased the risk of running out of money. I could not find a single example of a retiring year or withdrawal amount when holding any amount of cash provided a higher success rate than holding no cash. Now, the study showed that holding cash does not protect you. In fact, it often increases your risk of running out of money. So now there's an argument that holding cash has a good behavioral effect on investors. With some cash, you may stay invested and avoid the big mistake, we call it, of selling your investments while they are down. To the extent this is true, holding some cash may be beneficial for the behavioral effect only. But cash alone does not actually protect you. It's safer not to hold cash. Now, the reasons for these surprising results. The results of history are quite surprising, especially that investing in bonds or cash increased the risk of running out of money. Why would stocks provide a more reliable retirement income? Aren't they risky? What if the market crashes early in your retirement? So let's put some perspective on it. So the risk in retirement is running out of money. You can run out of money in 3 main ways. 1, you withdraw too much from your investments. 2, you invest too aggressively. Your investments lose money and don't recover quickly. Or 3, you invest too conservatively so that your rate of return is too low to support your withdrawals. So now the study showed that the risk of stocks is real, but exaggerated, while the risk of bonds are much greater than most people realize. So the risk of stocks is short-term and medium-term market declines and inflation, I guess. The risk of bonds is long-term low returns or inflation. So if there's even one period of high inflation in your 30-year retirement, you'll likely run out of money if you have it all in bonds or GICs. So now, and there's almost always been a period of high inflation in a 30-year retirement. So the study by Professor Jeremy Siegel in his investment classic Stocks for the Long Run showed stocks are actually more reliable than bonds after inflation. So this is what's behind it being so safe. So the standard deviation, which is a measure of uncertainty, of returns after inflation is lower for stocks than bonds for periods of 20 years or more. A stock market crash early in your retirement can be a problem. The financial people call it the sequence of returns risk. However, the truth is that the stock market usually bounces back within a year or two. Stock market losses only cause a problem over a 30-year retirement once in the last 146 years, and that's retiring in 1929. That's the only time. Inflation was the problem 4 of the 5 times that investing 100% in stocks failed. So now we experienced this with clients that retired in the early 2008, just before the largest market crash since 1929 to 32. So they retired on track for the retirement plan, but 6 months later, they were down 40%. What did we do? We kept sending them the same monthly income from their financial plan. In a few cases, we had to reduce it by $100 to $300 a month for a year or two. In 2 to 3 years, their investments had fully recovered. So now this is a worst case scenario, but end up not affecting their retirement. Now, stock markets go up and down a lot in short periods of time, but returns have been reliable over 25-year periods of time. Note the worst 25-year return in the stock market, that's since 1930, so that's periods of time ending in 1955, was 7.9% a year, 8% a year. So now this is how to manage the sequence of returns risk. Note sequence of returns risk has not been an issue if you stay invested in equities for the full 25 years. So adding fixed income has made 30-year retirements less reliable. So staying invested in equities has been a far more reliable way to manage sequence of returns risk. Now, the risk of bonds is more subtle, but far more likely to happen. You can run out of money either from interest rates being low or inflation being high. So now bonds get killed by inflation. There have been 40-year periods of time when bonds lost money after inflation. They paid interest, but your investments pay for less of your lifestyle expenses than they did 40 years ago. The longest time this was from 1940 to 1980. So note this worst period for bonds from 1940 to 80 started when interest rates were very low, like they were recently, from 2009 to 22. Now, bottom line, stock markets are more reliable over time than most people realize. This is the reason equities consistently provide a more reliable retirement, and the reason why the results of the study are probably surprising to most people. Now, what is wrong with just investing safely in bonds or GICs? So history shows that having 100% in bonds or GICs can mean you run out of money if you withdraw too much or if inflation is higher. So you are going to invest this, if you're going to invest this conservatively, you should limit your withdrawal to 2.5% of your investments each year. This means, for example, $1 million portfolio can give you an income of $25,000 a year, while it can be $40,000 or more within an equity portfolio. Now, don't forget that you will want your income to rise with inflation. You will have to cash in a bit of your principal every year, not just live off the interest. Now, fixed income is lower income, general principle. It's important to understand this trade-off. Holding more fixed income means smaller market declines and may give you a feeling of security, but your actual risk of running out of money is significantly higher unless you live with lower income that is sustainable. So bottom line, do you want a fixed income or rising income by inflation during retirement? Bonds and GICs are good for a fixed income, but can get killed by inflation, especially over many years. So stocks are much better at providing rising income. They tend to adjust to inflation. Now, does your retirement income need to rise with inflation? So the part of retirement income planning that's most commonly missed is inflation. You need your income to rise by inflation. So I see people trying to do their own calculation and they calculate for year one, but you got to allow for rising income for 30 years. So inflation is a huge factor over a 30-year retirement. With low inflation of 2%, the cost of living will roughly double during your retirement. Inflation has averaged closer to 4% historically, which means the cost of living roughly quadruples. You have probably heard seniors complain about being on a fixed income. This is because they withdraw the interest only from their GICs. So their income is fixed, not rising with inflation. It's like you're getting a pay cut every year for 30 years. Your expenses keep rising, but your income is fixed. Now, some advisors say that lifestyle expenses do not actually rise by inflation during retirement because seniors spend less on travel and entertainment as they get older. So others say this is often just a temporary lull. You may travel a lot in your 60s and 70s, then less in your 80s, but then you may move to a retirement home in your 90s or in your 80s and have higher expenses. This is especially true if you want a nice private retirement home, not a government one. My own experience working with retirees is that, for the most part, income determines lifestyle. Those that have a good income tend to maintain a more active lifestyle. If you have money and health, you'll likely maintain the same lifestyle through your 80s. So cruises are full of people in their 70s and 80s, especially the luxury cruises. Those with limited income are forced to spend less. So now the best advice is to plan for your income to rise by inflation. You don't know what will happen. Living longer and healthier is the norm today. If you can afford to maintain your lifestyle, you will have more options throughout your life. So planning for inflation means you can afford your lifestyle throughout your life. Remember that income determines lifestyle. Now, risk tolerance. The surprising result that equities consistently provide a safer retirement than bonds or cash means we must discuss risk tolerance. In the last 146 years, investing 90 to 100% in equities has been the safest, but you should not necessarily invest this way. It's important to invest based on your risk tolerance. Most people have a fear of losing money and don't really understand the stock market, which can lead to, the big mistake. Now, the big mistake is selling investments or switching to more conservative investments after they go down. This locks in your loss and does not allow your investments to recover. So you only get the retirement safety and higher return of stocks if you stay invested during the down markets. The best way to think of your risk tolerance is your ability to avoid the big mistake. In a worst case scenario, so if you invest 50% equities, 50% bonds, and there's a huge 40% market decline, your investments may be down roughly 20%. Can you avoid the big mistake with a 20% decline? Okay, and if you're 100% equities, can you avoid it with a 40% decline? So now it's a good idea to get educated on stock market history. Many people don't understand it and are scared of losing all their money in stocks. All their money in stocks. I would suggest the largest market crashes likely to happen in your life are probably in the 40 to 50% range, not 100%. So I have a video specifically on this. Can you be confident in the stock market? The highest and most reliable retirement incomes are with 90 to 100% in equities, but only if you can invest effectively that way and stick to it through bear markets. There will almost definitely be very large down markets during your retirement. Now, if you commit the big mistake even once during retirement, the higher returns and more reliable retirement from equities might not happen for you. So the best advice is have a decent exposure to equities, but within your risk tolerance. Don't own equities past your ability to remain confident in a large bear market. It may be best to maintain the investment allocation you had just before you retired. You were comfortable with that, supposedly. Most people assume they should invest more conservatively when they retire, but the 146-year study proved that that increases your risk of running out of money. At 3, no matter what, never make the big mistake by selling or switching to conservative investments after a market decline. If you find that you can't tolerate it, then decide that you are going to hold it anyway and wait for recovery. Then decide whether or not you should adjust your risk tolerance and your retirement income. Now, advanced retirement income strategies. Is there a way to safely take a higher retirement income? Now, the main focus of my study was choosing a withdrawal amount and increasing it every year by inflation. What if we manage the withdrawal instead of increasing it every year? So now I looked at a wide variety of ways to manage your retirement income, including only increasing by inflation in good years, having some type of cap and floor on the withdrawals, reducing withdrawals by some percent if they get too high, etc. I compared my best strategies with various studies, including, several actuarial studies and some advisor formulas such as the Guyton Cleaner strategy and the Hebler Autopilot. I tried to find the best formula to manage retirement income to allow a higher and safer income. Now, the options are complex. I won't get into it here, but I did find there are effective ways that had 100% success in history with withdrawal rates of 5% and even 6% if they are managed effectively, which means you have to be willing to cut back a little bit in some cases. You should be careful with these methods since you will have to manage your income effectively. Now, here's a summary and the best advice: how to maximize your retirement income. So what's the best way to set up your retirement income to give you the maximum income with the lowest risk of running out of money? Number 1, Equities are safer. So don't assume you need to invest more conservatively just because you're retired. Retirement is for 30 plus years. So the median retirement age is 62, and 50% of couples age 62 have at least one of them live to 94. That's 32 years. Consider keeping the same allocation you had before retiring. Equities are taxed at much lower rates than bonds and GICs as well. Number 2, fixed income is lower income. The more conservatively you invest, the lower your retirement income should be. Investing for more long-term growth means you can have a more comfortable retirement. Number 3, be smart about your risk tolerance. Invest with the highest amount in stocks that is within your risk tolerance. The more conservatively you invest, the more likely you will run out of money, at least at any withdrawal amount. So get educated on stock and bond market history so you have an accurate picture of risks and returns. Make sure you can avoid the big mistake. Again, I have that video on can you be confident in the stock market? Give you a lot of the information about the history. Number 4, inflation is huge. Inflation will make the cost of living double or quadruple or more during your retirement. You need a rising income, not a fixed income. Number 5, it's safer not to hold cash. Holding cash does not protect you and may increase your risk of running out of money. Number 6, is the 4% rule safe? Yes for equity investors, no for income investors. The success of the 4% rule depends on how you invest. Equity investors at 70 to 100% in equities can safely withdraw 4%. Balanced investors, 60 to 40 or 40 to 60, should reduce it to a 3.8% rule. Conservative investors, that's more than 60% bonds or GICs, should limit it to a 3% rule. And bond or GIC investors with no equities should limit it to the 2.5% rule. Now, I came up with my own rule of thumb. So Ed's rule of thumb for a safe withdrawal rate. So it's 2.5% plus 0.2 for every 10% in equities. Okay, so with no equities, it's 2.5% withdrawal is safe. With 70% in equities, you take 0.2 times 7 for a safe withdrawal rate of 3.9%. So with 75% or more equities, the 4% rule should provide you with a reliable inflation-adjusted retirement income. Number 8, higher income is possible with effective management. You can have a higher income by withdrawing 5% or even 6% of your investments if you manage your income effectively or are working with a financial planner who knows how to manage that effectively. All right, thank you for listening. What you learned is, what is the typical advice given to seniors and does it work? What does Ed's study of 146 years of history show about the 4% rule? Which asset allocations provide the most reliable retirement income? What is the main risk to your retirement income for any asset allocation? Is it safer to hold some cash to use during market downturns? What are the reasons that the actual results of history are surprising? How can you manage sequence of returns risk? What is the impact of inflation? How does your risk tolerance affect your retirement income? What is Ed's rule of thumb for a safe withdrawal rate? And are there advanced methods to manage a higher retirement income with 100% success? All right, thanks for listening. My name is Ed Rempel. My blog is Unconventional Wisdom. It's the #1 blog in Canada for a full-service financial planner. It's just edrempel.com or unconventionalwisdom.ca. So remember, if you use Unconventional Wisdom, it's .ca because we're in Canada. If you're interested in a free 30-minute consultation to see whether or not it makes sense for us to work together, just go to edrempel.com/talk. If you subscribe to my blog, podcast, and YouTube, all that means is you get my weekly post sent to you by email. We don't market it any other way. My podcast is edrempel.com/listen. My YouTube is edrempel.com/watch. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.